Well, that was Motown Junk from Manic Street Preachers, and welcome to Nicky Wire. How are you doing?
I'm fine, actually.
Good. So 21 years, 37 singles, and 10 studio albums. Your 21st birthday.
Making me feel old. No, it's... looking back, it evokes a lot of really kind and soft and warm memories and some sad ones as well. But... It feels like a pretty impressive body of work. We're not ones for sort of looking back in reverie, but for once I think we feel it's the right time.
And this gig that you're doing at the O2 in London on the 17th of December, are you doing all of that?
We are.
So...
You hear the sigh of fear in my voice.
That's incredible. Because, there's one of the joke that always goes around with bands. It's like, do your hits and... off.
Yeah.
Well, you really are, aren't you?
There's no complaints on this one. No dodgy album tracks that only the band like.
Although there is that wonderful cover, Soul Mining,
Yes.
to me is a brilliant album.
Yes.
And it reminds me of having oven chip butties, listening to it incessantly before I used to go in to do my show at Radio 1 when I started there. And Matt Johnson is, well, he's still doing amazing stuff. Were you a fan?
Yeah,
obviously.
But James in particular, I love this song. I think everyone who hears it would love this song. But James was really deeply into the full stop. We were talking about it in the studio when we were doing it. And it just does remind him of listening to you, back in the day in Oxford Roadshow and all that kind of stuff where the would pop up. And I really got into him around Beaten Generation. I thought when Johnny Marr joined, his lyrics were absolutely amazing on the Beaten Generation album. But... I was kind of pushing for My Favourite Dress by the Wedding Present.
Oh, right.
And a track by the Prisoners called Whenever I'm Gone.
Gosh.
But we sort of give this a Manics makeover, and I think it sounds like a real effervescent tribute to a great song.
I think it's an absolutely superb version, because sometimes with covers you kind of go, if you're not going to add anything, or or just don't. But you've always been good at doing covers, because Umbrella, Take the Skinheads Bowling, Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head.
Suicide is Painless.
Suicide is Painless.
I think it's always down to if you love a song. If it's calculated and you're just doing it for some different reason. But Velocity Girl we did once by Primal Scream, the McCarthy covers, it's just because we genuinely love those records. And you just feel like you are doing a tribute. There's nothing sort of severely intellectual involved. It's really trying to give what you consider a great song the kind of passion that you feel for it.
Well, let's listen to the Manics with This Is the Day. This is the day from the Manics, and my guest is Nicky Wire. And just recently we've heard that campaigners have lost their bid to save libraries in North West London. 6 libraries will close, and this is seen as a test case for other libraries that are fighting to stay open. And you love libraries, don't you?
Yeah, it just seems an intrinsic part of the fabric of culture that, made Britain a better place. In terms of just people just learning for free. I mean, I can't think of anything better than that. And just in a community sense, and growing up, and obviously libraries gave us power, gave us our biggest hits.
Well, there's a lyric.
So I've got to give a nod to them, because they have inspired one of our biggest ever earners.
But do you remember? Because I vividly remember being taken to the library for the first time by my mum. I was 4, Bootle Library, and I got a book out. It was about a pixie sitting on a fence, and I read it so quickly I had to go back because I loved the atmosphere in the library. I was so excited about it. Was I was a kid on the council estate. All right, it was only little, but I knew there was a big world in that library.
No, it's true. And my dad was a massive reader, and he'd never had education. He'd started work at the age of 14, 15 or whatever, I think straight down the mine. And but he just loved reading. My mum had the ritual of going to get him books, 5 books every week, and then I would go up. And I remember she brought me back a Malcolm Lowry book, Under the Volcano.
Yeah.
I was pretty hardcore, actually. Like, man, I'm only 12. But and then I did a lot of revising up there, for my A levels especially, and my O levels. I remember just sitting there because it is so peaceful and quiet. And It's just kind of magical places, and it just, you always seem like a kind of old reactionary when you're against something that's old, but I think it's much deeper than that,
I think so. I mean, historically, we've got to keep them. And all right, I know people, technology, and they're there with their little tablets on the tube or the train or whatever. But just, yes, what's going to happen when a library closes down? Where do those books go?
No, I know. Well, I think the Tories would have us having a waiting room of an NHS turned into a library run by mythical volunteers that don't exist.
Well, if you're rich enough to own everything you want, I mean, that's there for people, isn't it? Anybody can just walk in. And
I mean, again, it sounds a bit old-fashioned, but Design for Life was inspired by the miners building their own institutes with their own money, and every one of those institutes had a library in them because they actually wanted to better themselves. They didn't want their children to go down. I felt that me and my brother were lucky enough to go to university because my dad had just worked so hard to stop us having to do the hard labour that he did.
And were you the first in your family to go to uni?
My brother was.
Right.
My brother was. He was the first.
And what did he do?
He did American studies, and he sort of disappeared into America for a year and came back with Allen Ginsberg and Corso and Jack Kerouac, and like a changed man.
Yes. Well, we're going to have you doing spoken word, and that's why we were talking about the library spoken word sessions. And we've said pick anything you want. It could be prose, it could be poetry, it could be a lyric, it could be an extract from your favourite play, whatever.
Okay, well, I think I'll start with a Philip Larkin poem called Wants, because I remember going to Cardiff with my mum. I've got it written in my book. She bought me High Windows. I think it's about 84. And it's just this... I was always loved... I think the four of us as Manics loved being on our own. Solitude is so important, and it's kind of what you get from this poem. So here we go. Beyond all this, the wish to be alone. However the sky grows dark with invitation cards, however we follow the printed directions of sex, however the family is photographed under the flagstaff. Beyond all this, the wish to be alone. Beneath it all, desire of oblivion runs. Despite the artful tensions of the calendar, the life insurance, the tabled fertility rites, the costly aversion of the eyes from death. Beneath it all, desire of oblivion runs.
Wonderful and brilliantly read.
It's scary reading words that good.
Well, do you write poetry at all?
I do, for my sins.
Yeah.
Yes, and I do find it is separate from lyric writing.
I was going to say, because I asked Holly Johnson that, because he writes poetry. How do you decide what's a lyric and what's a poem?
As a rule, they are separate entities. They just... I guess there's a freedom to poetry where you can be slightly more, not unconventional, because poems are quite strict, but they are different in the terms of the stanzas and the scan. You
don't have to think about the accompaniment, do you? Because it just is.
Exactly. I mean, when Richey was still around, I guess some of the words were like poems, especially on the Holy Bible. They are amazing pieces of prose. They're that long. Yeah. But I was always slightly more structured in my lyric writing. But poetry just gives me a chance to... I think you can be really daring with poetry as well. You can go to places where perhaps it's harder to go in a song because you're limited. I like being limited by a lyric. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely adore Jim's giving me a tune to words. I don't feel hemmed in, but poetry gives you a chance just to go to those places which are much darker.
Yeah. Well, what else have you got for us?
There's a poem called Reflections by R.S. Thomas, who I think he's Wales's greatest poet. I mean, Dylan Thomas is our romantic genius, shall we say. But R.S. Thomas is just savage in his critique of what it is to be Welsh. Incredibly honest. And he's just an amazing man. He was a priest, vicar, just never had any material possession at all. He kind of was nominated for the Nobel, but he wasn't interested in it. Married for decades and decades. He was always seen as the ogre of Wales because he was so honest. But
really? He
had a massive influence on This Is My Truth and Tell Me Yours in particular. I actually nicked a couple of his lines looking at them. This poem is called Reflections, and the book was called No Truce with the Furies, and I I think it's "You stole the sun from my heart. There is no truce with my furies." So, sorry, RS. But, okay, so this is called Reflections. The Furies are at home in the mirror. It is their address. Even the clearest water, if deep enough, can drown. Never think to surprise them. Your face approaching ever so friendly is the white flag they ignore. There is no truce with the Furies. A mirror's temperature is always at 0. It is ice in the veins. Its camera is an X-ray. It is a chalice held out to you in silent communion, where gaspingly you partake of a shifting identity, never your own.
Once again, fantastic.
And I just saw it at that, because we become really successful at this point. That line, "The Furies are at home," it just felt like we are still as just angry as we've always been. We might be playing arenas and stadiums now, but intrinsically we're the same people we always were.
So the anger and the passion and everything is still there.
Yeah.
What your love of words, were you encouraged at school? Because I know after I'd done my English A level, I didn't want to read a book for a few years because they told you how to interpret it.
No, I think that's true. I think I loved doing Shakespeare at O level and stuff, and A level was a bit more Emma and Charlotte Bronte and stuff, which I struggled with. You know, I still enjoyed bits of it. We did Wasteland by T.S. Eliot.
I couldn't do the Emma bit.
No, I can't imagine you doing that. But I love doing the Wasteland. And, to be on Faber and Faber now, after reading all that Sylvia Plath and Larkin and T.S. Eliot, when I signed with them, they took me down to the archive and they showed me the table where they used to have all these meetings, and showed me a couple of postcards Larkin had sent in, and that was just, you know, it's the sort of stuff that me and Richey, I guess, would talk about happening.
I see Jarvis Cocker's just signed.
Yeah.
Hasn't he, doing A&R? What a great job.
So I think Pete Townsend did that back in the 80s.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, opportunity that must be.
I think John Savage, he did a biography of the Kinks, and that was the first sort of Faber and Faber sort of, they pop music.
Yeah.
That was their first book, because he gave me a copy of it, John, and I, lucky enough, Lipstick Traces by Grail Marcus.
Yep.
It's my favourite book ever. He asked me to write a foreword for it, so I did that this year as well. So I just, you know, the connections of like listening to you when we were young, I'm going to Faye, all these things. That's why I love Lipstick Traces so much, because all these connections ended up joining.
Yes, yeah. We'll do one more for us before we...
Well, a couple of quotes I've got, actually. There's one by Grail Marcus, and there's one by J.G. Ballard. And the Grail Marcus is pretty short. It's just... music seeks to change life. Life goes on. The music is left behind. That is what is left to talk about. So that's the masterful Grail. And then J.G. Ballard, who's a massive influence on Richey. I kind of like the idea of him as a man more than anything, living in Shepperton in this suburban, bringing up his kids, drinking whiskey after he dropped them off to school. His fiction I just struggled with a bit, because it had that sort of science fiction element a bit. But Richey just... I think he's probably the most influential author in terms of bands. Yeah. In terms of titles, and him and Kubrick, I think. You know, there's a million bands nicked stuff from... And for the new album, for the greatest hits, this quote just seemed really applicable, and it just says, "Memory is the greatest gallery in the world, and I can play an endless archive of images."
That's brilliant too, isn't it? You picked some fantastic stuff.
I thought in the digital age,
yes,
that, you know, nothing will ever... A cloud will never replace the memory in the brain, hopefully.
Hopefully not. Manic Street Preachers, National Treasures. That's out on the 31st of October. It's the complete singles, and of course you can see them 17th of December at the O2 Arena. Give my love to the others.
I shall do, yes. Always a pleasure.